What happened in this courtroom defied everything we know about pit bulls, justice, and the power of compassion. A judge was about to make a decision that would separate a child from the only family she had left, when something extraordinary happened that no one saw coming. 8-year-old Sarah was moments away from being placed in foster care. Her beloved pit bull Zeus scheduled for euthanization. The courtroom was silent, the gavel ready to fall, when Zeus did something that changed the course of both their lives forever. What you're about to witness will challenge everything you thought you knew about these misunderstood animals. This story will completely change how you see pit bulls and the incredible bond between children and their pets. Make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this remind us why love always finds a way. But first, let me take you back to where this impossible journey began. The fluorescent lights in the family court waiting room buzz with relentless hum. Sarah Williams sits motionless, her small frame dwarfed by institutional furniture. The air smells of disinfectant and old coffee, carrying the weight of broken families who've waited in these same seats. At 8 years old, Sarah has learned that waiting rooms are where bad news finds you. Beside her, Zeus shifts his weight, massive head resting against her shoulder. The 3-year-old pit bull mix weighs nearly as much as she does, but moves with careful gentleness of someone who understands fragility. His brown eyes scan constantly, always watching, always protecting. Scar tissue around his muzzle tells a story Sarah knows by heart, a story mirroring her own in ways adults refuse to understand. 3 weeks ago, Grandmother Rose collapsed in their kitchen while making Sarah's favorite pancakes. Maple syrup smell still haunts the empty house on Elm Street, where social services placed yellow tape across the front door like crime scene ribbon. Sarah hasn't spoken since the funeral. Not to social workers, not to court-appointed psychiatrists, not to anyone. Except Zeus. With him, she whispers secrets in darkness, shares fears in a language only they understand. Miss Chen's voice cuts through yesterday's preliminary hearing like a blade. Our policy is clear regarding pit bull breeds and foster placements. Too much liability. Statistics roll off her tongue like rehearsed prayer. Bite incidents, insurance claims, legal precedents. What she doesn't mention, 17 families already refused to take Sarah because of Zeus. But this isn't about breed discrimination. This is about two souls who found each other in trauma's wreckage and built something beautiful from the pieces. 4 years ago, when Sarah still struggled with nightmares of smoke and flames, Grandmother Rose made a life-changing decision. She drove to where police had raided an illegal dogfighting operation. Among 37 seized dogs, one wouldn't eat, wouldn't approach humans, wouldn't lift his head when volunteers tried coaxing him forward. Zeus had been a bait dog, thrown into rings with trained fighters to build their aggression. His spirit was so broken that euthanasia seemed merciful. Rose saw something else. Maybe Zeus reminded her of Sarah after the fire. That same hollow look, same careful distance from anything that might hurt again. She brought him home despite neighbors' protests, despite Mrs. Henderson calling animal control twice, despite anonymous letters warning about dangerous dogs. Transformation didn't happen overnight. For weeks, Zeus lived in Rose's living room corner, refusing food unless placed across the room. Sarah spent days in equally distant corners, coloring black scribbles until crayons wore to nubs. Dr. Martinez later explained clinically, parallel processing trauma, both stuck in survival mode, unable to trust that safety was real. The breakthrough came Tuesday morning when Sarah dropped her juice glass. Shattering sound triggered a panic attack, crash too similar to windows exploding in fire. As she hyperventilated on kitchen floor, Zeus did something unprecedented. He crossed the room. Not to Rose reaching for Sarah, but to the little girl herself. He pressed warm body against her chest and began breathing, slow, deliberate breaths that taught Sarah's lungs to remember rhythm. From that moment, they were inseparable. Sarah's nightmares stopped when Zeus slept beside her bed. His appetite returned when she hand-fed him treats. She taught him not all hands bring pain. He taught her not all love ends in loss. Neighbors stopped complaining when they saw Sarah laugh for the first time in years, running through Rose's backyard with Zeus bounding like a faithful shadow. Attorney James Thompson has fought cases like this for 15 years, but never seen a bond quite like theirs. The science is clear. Oxytocin levels spike when humans and dogs interact, same hormone released between mothers and children. For Sarah, Zeus isn't just a pet. He's therapeutic intervention more effective than months of traditional therapy. But science doesn't always win in family court. Judge Morrison, despite 30 years on the bench, has seen good intentions lead to tragedy. Last year, a county Pitbull attacked a neighbor's child. The lawsuit bankrupted the foster family. His hands are tied by policies written in blood of previous mistakes. Outside the courthouse, Animal Control Officer Davis sits in his truck, engine running. 8 years on this job taught him the difference between dogs who might be saved and dogs already lost. What haunts him? Zeus isn't lost. He's found. His behavior assessment shows no aggression markers typical of fighting dogs. Instead, scores indicate something rarer, a dog who learned to heal. The Hendersons, Sarah's potential foster family, have been certified 3 years. Beautiful suburban home, excellent references, genuine love to give. But their insurance policy is explicit, no pit bulls, no exceptions. We wish we could take both, Mrs. Henderson told Miss Chen through tears, but we can't risk losing our home. Previous attempts crumbled against the same wall of liability and fear. The no-kill shelter has a months-long waiting list. Other foster families won't consider a child with such attachment to a dangerous breed. Local pit bull rescue is overcrowded and underfunded. Every door that might keep them together has slammed shut. But something is different this time. Something that might change everything. Sometimes when the world takes everything you love, you find strength you never knew existed. Sometimes that strength comes not from anger or desperation, but from quiet certainty that some bonds are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The courthouse clock ticks toward 2:30 p.m. In 30 minutes, Judge Morrison will make a decision that either reunites a family or tears apart the only love Sarah has left. The question isn't whether Zeus is dangerous. It's whether the world is brave enough to see that love in its purest form can heal even the deepest wounds. Zeus, sensing the moment's weight, presses closer to Sarah's side, his steady heartbeat a promise that some things, the most important things, never give up without a fight. The courtroom feels smaller when Miss Chen stands to present her case. Her heels click against the polished floor with the precision of a metronome, each step building toward a verdict that could destroy everything Sarah has left. The manila folder in her hands contains what she calls evidence, but what Attorney James knows are nothing more than statistics stripped of context. Numbers that paint Zeus as a monster instead of the gentle soul who's never raised his voice, let alone his teeth, in anger. Miss Chen's voice carries the authority of someone who's made these arguments 100 times before. Pitbull attacks account for 65% of fatal dog incidents, despite representing only 6% of the dog population, she explains to Judge Morrison, her tone as cold as the fluorescent lights overhead. The numbers roll off her tongue like an incantation, designed to conjure fear where love once lived. What she doesn't mention is that these statistics rarely account for misidentification, that any large, muscular dog involved in an incident is often labeled a pit bull, regardless of actual breed. The photographs come next, and this is where the cruelty truly begins. Zeus's scarred muzzle fills the projector screen, the healed wounds from his days as a bait dog twisted into evidence of his supposed violent nature. Miss Chen points to each scar with clinical detachment, describing them as proof of his fighting background, without ever acknowledging that Zeus was the victim, not the aggressor. Sarah's small hand finds Zeus's neck, her fingers tracing the same scars that she's kissed goodnight 1,000 times, understanding what the adults in this room refuse to see. The neighbor complaints read like a catalog of prejudice dressed up as public safety concerns. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down describes Zeus as intimidating due to his size, though she's never witnessed any aggressive behavior. Mr. Rodriguez mentions feeling uncomfortable during walks, despite admitting Zeus has never so much as barked at him. Each statement builds on the last, creating a narrative of danger where none exists, transforming a dog who greets the mailman with tail wags into a public menace. Judge Morrison reviews the dangerous dog classification with the weight of 3 decades on the bench pressing down on his shoulders. The law is clear about breed restrictions in foster care placements, he notes, his voice carrying the wariness of someone who's seen too many cases where good intentions collided with harsh realities. The insurance liability alone could bankrupt any family willing to take both Sarah and Zeus, and previous court cases have established precedents that tie his hands more tightly than he'd like to admit. This is when Sarah begins to break. The tears start silently, rolling down her cheeks as the adults around her discuss Zeus like he's a piece of evidence rather than the beating heart that's kept her anchored to hope. Zeus senses her distress immediately, pressing his massive head against her shoulder with the gentleness of someone who understands that sometimes touch is the only language that matters. His breathing becomes deliberately slow and deep, the same technique he used to calm her panic attacks during those first terrible months after Rose's death. Attorney James rises to counter the breed discrimination, but he's fighting an uphill battle against decades of fear-mongering and sensationalized media coverage. He presents Dr. Martinez's behavioral assessment showing Zeus's exceptional temperament scores, his lack of any aggressive indicators, his remarkable ability to provide therapeutic support for Sarah's trauma recovery. But numbers work both ways in a courtroom, and for every study James cites about the healing power of human-animal bonds, Ms. Chen has another statistic about Pitbull incidents ready to deploy. The first major blow comes during the 15-minute recess when the Hendersons call Attorney James on his cell phone. Their voice cracks with genuine emotion as Mrs. Henderson explains through tears that they simply cannot risk taking Zeus along with Sarah. Their insurance company has made it clear that any incident involving a pit bull would void their coverage entirely, potentially costing them their home, their financial security, everything they've worked 30 years to build. They want to help Sarah desperately, but they have 3 children of their own to consider, and the risk is simply too great to bear. The second devastating revelation comes from Animal Control Officer Davis, who approaches the bench during the same recess with information that changes everything. The county shelter is facing critical overcrowding, operating at 140% capacity due to recent hoarding case seizures. Their policy for unadopted pit bulls is euthanasia after 48 hours. A policy designed not from cruelty, but from the harsh mathematics of limited resources and unlimited need. If Zeus is removed from Sarah today, he won't be waiting for adoption in a kennel somewhere. He'll be waiting for death. When court reconvenes, Sarah's world begins to collapse in real time. The fluorescent lights seem brighter, the air thinner, as Judge Morrison reviews his options aloud. The panic attack starts subtly, with Sarah's breathing becoming shallow and rapid, her small hands gripping the edge of her chair until her knuckles turn white. Zeus recognizes the signs immediately, having guided her through dozens of these episodes over the past 3 weeks since Rose's death. Court security notices the growing tension and approaches to separate Zeus from Sarah, citing safety protocols that seem designed more to protect the adult's comfort than Sarah's well-being. This is exactly the wrong move at exactly the wrong moment. Zeus has never been trained as a service dog, but trauma has a way of creating its own education, and he knows that separating from Sarah during a panic attack could send her into a psychological spiral that might take months to recover from. Zeus becomes agitated, not from aggression, but from protective instinct, positioning himself between Sarah and the approaching officers with the calculated precision of someone who's learned to read danger in human movements. His body language speaks fluency in a language the courtroom doesn't understand. The slight lowering of his head, the tense muscles of his shoulders, the way his eyes never leave Sarah, even as multiple adults advance toward them. This isn't the posture of attack, but of absolute, unwavering protection. Miss Chen seizes the moment with prosecutorial efficiency, pointing to Zeus's defensive positioning as exactly the dangerous behavior the court should be concerned about. Her voice rises with vindication as she describes a dog who won't obey commands from authority figures, who becomes agitated in stressful situations, who shows protective behaviors that could easily escalate into violence. What she's describing is loyalty, but in the sterile language of legal proceedings, loyalty becomes liability. Judge Morrison calls for order as Sarah's panic attack intensifies, her gasping breaths echoing off the courtroom walls like a prayer no one wants to hear. The preliminary ruling comes like a gavel strike to the heart. Zeus must be removed immediately, transferred to animal control pending Sarah's placement in foster care. The decision is presented as temporary, pending further evaluation, but everyone in the room knows that temporary often becomes permanent in the machinery of social services. Sarah collapses to the floor as the words hit her, her small body convulsing with the kind of grief that steals oxygen from the air. Zeus refuses to move away from her despite the increasingly urgent commands from court officers, despite the growing circle of adults who see his protective stance as confirmation of their worst fears. He covers her body with his own, creating a shield of fur and muscle and unconditional love between Sarah and a world that seems determined to take away everything she holds dear. Attorney James makes one final desperate plea as Sarah loses consciousness, her panic attack reaching the dangerous threshold where psychological trauma becomes physical emergency. His voice cracks with the emotion he's tried to keep professional as he begs Judge Morrison to see what's happening in front of them. A child dying from grief, while the only being who can heal her is being forcibly removed by the very system meant to protect her. Zeus remains motionless over Sarah's unconscious form, his steady breathing the only sound of calm in a courtroom erupting with crisis. He's not showing aggression. He's showing love in its purest, most protective form. But sometimes in the harsh mathematics of legal systems and insurance policies and statistical probabilities, love isn't enough to tip the scales toward mercy. The approaching footsteps of multiple officers echo like a countdown toward heartbreak, each step bringing them closer to the moment when the last thread connecting Sarah to hope will be severed forever. The courtroom has become a tableau of frozen crisis. Sarah lies motionless on the cold marble floor, her small chest rising and falling in the shallow rhythm of someone whose mind has fled from unbearable reality. Zeus stands over her like a living statue, every muscle in his 70-pound frame coiled with protective tension. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows that make his scars more pronounced, transforming his gentle face into something that feeds the fears of everyone watching. Paramedics hover at the edge of the scene, their medical bags in hand, but their feet rooted in place. Zeus's brown eyes track their every movement, not with aggression, but with the calculated awareness of someone who has learned that strangers often bring pain. His breathing remains steady and controlled, but his body language speaks in a dialect of protection that everyone can read but nobody wants to acknowledge. The lead paramedic, a 20-year veteran named Rodriguez, has seen plenty of dog attacks, but he's also seen enough therapy animals to recognize the difference between threat and devotion. Court security officers flank the scene, their hands hovering near weapons they hope they won't need to use. Officer Martinez whispers urgently to his partner about containment protocols, while keeping his eyes locked on Zeus's massive head. The air in the courtroom tastes metallic with tension, charged with the electricity of a situation balanced on the razor's edge between tragedy and miracle. Someone's radio crackles with static, the sound making Zeus's ears twitch but not breaking his vigil over Sarah. Judge Morrison grips his gavel with white knuckles, 30 years of judicial experience offering no precedent for the scene unfolding before his bench. He's watched families torn apart by circumstance and law, but he's never seen love manifest itself so clearly in defiance of authority. His voice carries the weight of reluctant duty as he begins to speak the words that will order Zeus's forcible removal, the phrase that will transform protection into resistance and love into legal liability. But Zeus moves before the order can be completed, and his movement changes everything. Instead of the aggressive lunge that everyone expects, Zeus lowers himself to the floor with the deliberate grace of someone performing a sacred ritual. His massive body settles beside Sarah's unconscious form, his head coming to rest gently on her chest where her heart beats its frightened rhythm against his scarred muzzle. The transformation from standing guard to lying in surrender happens in seconds, but those seconds stretch like hours in the breathless courtroom. The sound that emerges from Zeus's throat defies every expectation built up over the past hour of legal proceedings. It's not a growl or bark or any vocalization that suggests danger. Instead, a low, rhythmic whimpering begins, so soft it's barely audible beyond the first row of seats. The sound carries the weight of mourning, of a soul crying out against injustice in the only language he knows. Court reporter Janet Morrison, no relation to the judge, later describes it in her transcript as the sound of a heart breaking in real time. Sarah's unconscious mind recognizes the sound immediately. Her breathing, which has been rapid and shallow with panic, begins to slow and deepen, synchronizing with the gentle rhythm of Zeus's mourning song. It's a phenomenon that Dr. Martinez will later explain as autonomic nervous system regulation through parasympathetic activation. But in this moment it looks like nothing less than resurrection through love. Zeus adjusts his position with surgical precision, moving his body so that his steady heartbeat rests directly against Sarah's ear. 90 beats per minute, the rhythm that has lulled her to sleep through countless nightmares, the sound that taught her traumatized nervous system what safety feels like. His fur, warm from body heat and soft from Sarah's careful brushing every morning, creates a cocoon of familiar comfort around her small frame. Even the security officers find their hands dropping to their sides, weapons forgotten in the face of something that transcends their training. Officer Martinez, father of 3, recognizes therapeutic behavior when he sees it, regardless of the breed displaying it. The rigid protocols designed to manage dangerous situations become irrelevant when faced with a demonstration of healing that belongs more in a medical textbook than a legal proceeding. Sarah's eyelids flutter like butterfly wings testing the air before flight. The harsh courtroom lights filter through her lashes as consciousness returns, but the first thing she sees is Zeus's face inches from her own, his brown eyes holding the same patient devotion they've carried for 4 years. Her small arms move instinctively around his neck, finding the familiar landscape of scars and muscle and unconditional acceptance that has anchored her to hope through the darkest chapters of her young life. The panic attack releases its grip on her lungs as her breathing returns to normal, each inhalation drawing in the scent of Zeus's fur mixed with the antiseptic courtroom air. Zeus remains perfectly still as paramedics finally approach, allowing them to check Sarah's pulse and blood pressure while never removing his gentle weight from her chest. His cooperation is complete and immediate, the behavior of an animal who understands that Sarah's well-being takes precedence over his own fear of strangers. Judge Morrison watches in stunned silence as Sarah whispers something into Zeus's ear. Words too soft for the court microphones to capture, but profound enough to shift the entire atmosphere of the room. When she finally speaks aloud, Her voice carries the clarity of someone who has just witnessed a miracle and needs the world to understand what they've seen. "He's not dangerous," she says, her words echoing in the sudden silence. "He's my guardian angel." The courtroom exhales collectively. 30 people releasing breath they didn't realize they were holding. Attorney James feels tears on his cheeks for the first time in his 15-year career. Miss Chen stares at her statistical reports as if seeing them for the first time, numbers suddenly seeming inadequate to capture the complexity of love made manifest. Judge Morrison sets down his gavel, not with the finality of judgment, but with the gentleness of someone who has just witnessed something that changes everything. In this moment, everyone in the courtroom understands that they haven't just watched a panic attack resolved by a pet. They've seen the power of unconditional love to heal trauma, witnessed the profound bond between two souls who found each other in darkness and chose to create light. Zeus hasn't just calmed Sarah's crisis. He's demonstrated a truth that transcends breed stereotypes and legal precedents. That love, in its purest form, is the most powerful force for healing our broken world has ever known. The extended recess Judge Morrison calls carries hope instead of dread. He retreats to his chambers not to deliberate punishment, but to research therapy animal legislation, Zeus's gentle protection burning fresh in his memory. Within hours, the court stenographer's transcript spreads across the internet like wildfire. The 10-minute audio of Zeus calming Sarah's panic attack hits 50,000 views by sunset, 500,000 by midnight. Local news crews transform the courthouse into the epicenter of something bigger than legal proceedings. This isn't just about one girl and one dog. It's about challenging decades of breed discrimination with love made visible. The animal behaviorist who arrives the next morning has 23 years of experience evaluating therapy animals. Dr. Rebecca Chen has never seen a bond like Sarah and Zeus's. Zeus passes every assessment with scores that make her double-check measurements. His stress responses remain stable when separated from Sarah. His reactions to sudden noises and crowds fall within optimal therapy ranges. Most remarkably, his ability to read human emotional distress tests at levels typically seen only in dogs with years of specialized training. The Hendersons call Attorney James 3 days later, voices thick with emotion. Watching the news coverage forced them to confront their prejudices, and their insurance company agrees to make an exception for certified therapy animals. But a different family has already emerged from the avalanche of responses. The Morrison family lives on property bordering state forest. David is a retired veterinarian who specialized in rehabilitating abused animals. His wife Ellen ran grief counseling for children. They've fostered for 12 years, but never encountered a case that spoke to them like Sarah and Zeus's story. 6 months later, transformation is complete but ongoing. Sarah sits before the state legislature, voice steady as she addresses lawmakers about animal therapy's healing power. Zeus rests beside her in his official therapy dog vest, red fabric marking him as more than a pet, a professional partner in healing broken hearts. Judge Morrison occupies a gallery seat, no longer reluctant enforcer but advocate for animal-assisted therapy statewide. The legislation they're supporting would protect therapy animals in custody cases, ensuring healing relationships can't be severed by breed discrimination. The original Hendersons volunteer Saturdays at the county's new animal-assisted therapy program, watching children find healing through bonds with dogs they once feared. Sarah and Zeus visit family court regularly, transforming sterile waiting rooms into spaces where hope feels possible. The ripple effects extend beyond individual healing. Insurance companies in 4 states revise policies regarding certified therapy animals. Animal shelters report increased Pitbull adoptions as their story challenges prejudices one family at a time. But the most profound transformation occurs in quiet moments cameras never capture. Each morning, Sarah wakes to Zeus's head on the pillow beside her, steady breathing, a reminder that some promises never break. Their daily forest walks have become meditations on survival and joy. Two souls who found each other in darkness, now creating light for others. When Sarah addresses the legislature for the final time, her words carry wisdom beyond her years. Zeus didn't just save her life in that courtroom. He taught everyone that love doesn't recognize breed restrictions or insurance policies. Love simply exists, patient and persistent, waiting for the world to become brave enough to let it heal. Zeus shifts in his vest, brown eyes scanning the room with quiet confidence. He's already won the only victory that matters. In saving Sarah, he saved himself. In healing her trauma, he transformed his scars from symbols of suffering into badges of survival. Their story continues unfolding in courtrooms and therapy sessions across the state. Proof that profound change begins with recognizing that love, in all its forms, deserves protection under law. Sarah and Zeus's story reminds us that sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected sources. In a world quick to judge based on appearance, breed, or reputation, their bond proves that love recognizes no boundaries. Every child deserves a protector, and sometimes that protector comes with 4 legs and a heart bigger than any prejudice. The next time you see a pit bull, remember Zeus. The next time someone tells you it's impossible to overcome prejudice, remember that courtroom where love changed minds and saved lives. Look beyond the surface, beyond the stereotypes, and you might just find your own guardian angel waiting to prove the world wrong. If this story moved you the way it moved that entire courtroom, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Share your own stories of unexpected heroes in the comments below, whether they have 2 legs or 4. We share incredible true stories like this every week because the world needs more reminders that love always wins.